Welcome to the Mormon Medium Podcast, where we'll talk about spirituality, the paranormal, religion, and my journey in becoming a Mormon medium. I'm Nanette Ride. Thanks for listening. Now let's go have some fun.
Don't be afraid. Close your eyes. There's a moon overhead, but the sun will rise. Blood on our lips, such a poisonous bite. The sound of our hearts go bump, bump, bump in the night.
There was a series on Netflix called Unorthodox. So good. About this Jewish gal who was leaving her faith. I just remember this rich scene in the series. There was like 6 or 7 episodes. And she's in this restaurant and she's holding this pork sandwich and it's like slow-mo. And she's holding the sandwich and you can just see like the fear, like when I bite into this thing, I'm going to grieve my maker and I'm resisting. And she's in a very Orthodox, a very traditional Jewish family. And so she takes a bite, and I forget who she's there. She's there with a guy or a gal, but there's someone else across the table. And she runs out of the restaurant after the first bite. And like, you can just see the fear in her and the shame, like what I've done is totally not okay. And she leaves the restaurant with the thought she's going to throw up for sure. God will do something, and nothing happens. And it's this beautiful moment for her where she's got this altogether painful, this shameful response, like something's wrong with me and what I'm doing right now is so not okay. Mm-hmm. She didn't throw up. Jehovah didn't bring fire from heaven and consume her. And it was interesting. And so I think, and this is getting long, but per your statement around shame, I think some of it is reflecting back on what was believed previously and saying, hey, am I doing what's in alignment with my inner knowing? And I use that term. Mormons would say in alignment with the Spirit.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Others would say in alignment with in other Christian or Christian-related faiths say in alignment with my conscience. And I'm saying within my inner knowing, this part of me that says, this is good for me and I'm going to do this. It's referencing where you're at in that moment so that there's not that closed feedback loop where you're indirectly shaming you. I'm a bad me, and I know I shouldn't be doing this. Now, you're talking about other people doing that, and some of that is their attempts perhaps to reclaim you. You talked about someone earlier, and I'm not remembering the details. It was like, hey, come back, or do something different in the last episode.
Right. Well, a couple of people, my son wanted me to come back, that he was going to save me. And then my daughter-in-law, because I used the word Mormon in the Mormon medium, thought I was active again, and I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I shouldn't use the word then. I had no right to use the word. But it's just all this shaming. It's all of this judgment and fear. I feel bad for them because it's fear. But my clients, I keep seeing, for example, I have a client, she reached out. She says, I've always had gifts. I've always been able to have dreams. I've always seen things with my spiritual eyes. I've been able to see spirits. I've been able to communicate with the other side. I left the church and I can no longer do that. Did I do something horrifically wrong? And it's all her belief system wrapped around the church. That's her punishment for leaving the church, that she can't have those gifts when those are her divine gifts. They're part of her spirit. She'll always have them no matter where she's at or what she believes in. They're still her. Mm-hmm. But she didn't think of it that way because it was this indoctrination of shame. You did something wrong, so you're a bad person and you're going to hurt for it now. So anything bad that happens to you is because you left. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It makes a ton of sense. The other idea here too, and I want to get Brad's take on that, is this idea, I always want to build on that, and that is that in high demand religions, we'll use Mormonism as the one that's kind of on the hopper here that we're discussing.
Well, the show is the Mormon Medium.
Yeah, that's true. I forget the title here. It is this idea that we all go together in one large patriarchal chain. Mm-hmm. And so as we think about theological teaching within Mormonism, I'm going to quote it because I just am. It becometh every man who hath been warned to warn his neighbor. These other individuals, I'm going to give them some grace here, are only doing what's been conditioned within that system. And that's to reclaim anyone who's out of alignment, who's not on the covenant path, because they're experiencing sadness for you and fear. But interestingly enough, part of that fear was purportedly revealed to prophets previously with things like, God will hold you responsible, and there's a direct quote here, God will hold you responsible for those you might have saved had you done your duty. And so there's this fear with, we can only get there together.
How nebulous is that? Like you're going to be accountable for all those things that you might have done but didn't.
Right.
Even though you didn't know that you might have done them. That is so absurd.
Which is difficult, because then you have this, oh my heavens, I need to reclaim Nan, and she needs to come back. And that is based on kind of another unconscious teaching that's not necessarily theological. I call it a lurking variable as we think of the statistics world and economics. That's where it's coming from. And that is that intimacy is sameness. And I want to know your thoughts on this one, because this is going to go deep, but I can't be close to Nan or to Brad, or in this case, Nan, if we're not the same, because intimacy is sameness. If you are not one, you're not mine.
And actually, that is what got me through part of my faith crisis. You gave me that little nugget of information, and I was like, okay, yeah. It helped me understand where my family was coming from, you know? That's huge.
Wanting to be same so that they could be close. And if we're not the same,
then they can't be close.
Then we're fracturing. Like, we can't be close anymore.
Right.
I'm still stuck on, you're going to be responsible for the people you could have saved but didn't. Because if I didn't save Nan, and all of her posterity didn't get saved because I didn't save Nan, that could be hundreds of thousands of people that I never saved and I'm going to be responsible for.
Brad will be with me in hell, and we'll be spending time there together.
I'll drive the bus.
With fire and brimstone.
Wow. No, I'm sorry. I'm
You're just trying to take that in.
That's such a messed up thought. It's so messed up and so wrong.
That really is.
I'm sorry.
This is good.
I'm getting passionate about that.
I'm liking it. But that is this idea of, is it possible to promote and support this idea, at least here in this conversation, is it possible that we as three individuals, as beings on the planet, attempting our best way to seek, can promote a different idea, and that is that intimacy is a function of seeing people, per Nan earlier, where they are, and then embracing them. This namaste idea, right? The light, the goodness in me sees that goodness in you, and if they are on that, we'll use Mormonism here, on that covenant path, good for you.
100%.
Follow your heart, get in alignment.
Yes.
But do me a favor, as you attempt to seek your God on that covenant path within Mormonism, can you let other people different than you seek that same God, or gods plural perhaps, in a different way, without moving into this exclusionary, let's define our faith by who we exclude.
Yeah.
To make us special, a royal and chosen generation.
Right.
Like this idea that we're different and perhaps better, right? Versus like we're all in these different places, and we get to honor those paths and then spend more time in contemplation, in consideration, in reverence than it is, I'm right.
But how brilliant is that? You are, a royal and chosen group of people. You are going to be exalted above all others. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. I'm special now. Right? That really plays on people's emotions, because everyone wants to be special. Everyone wants to have someone be proud of them. Oh, I'm so proud of little Johnny for choosing to be baptized. They're 8. They don't know dick.
They want the party.
They want the candy bar poster that they're going to get for, getting dunked. So it's really a play on emotions. You're like, I want to be really political about this. Stop, Brad. Just stop.
Brad's so bold. I like that. But I was listening carefully. I think it brings up some interesting ideas that are rabbit holes we don't have to go down, but that you pinged in my brain there around informed consent. Something that those generations are concerned about within mental health and within medicine, that anymore there's an expectation that we're very clearly communicating, this is what you're paying for and this is what you're getting. I mean, I look at a surgery at one point that my wife had while pregnant, and so there's some high risk to that as a result of the baby and some of those pieces, and they had us fill out the same set of paperwork twice. And I said, I just filled this out. And they said, Right, you did. We're actually going to have you do it a second time, and we just want you to be really clear that, when you have a gal 6 months along, and that this is what we're doing at the appendix. This is high risk, and you could lose your baby. And so there is this increase of informed consent, and am I, for lack of a better term, put on notice, that I think religions, at least within the West that I'm aware of, are needing to shift so that there's more, hey, this is what's happening. And I don't know what will happen within Mormonism within 8-year-olds, but while that's doctrinal for them, that the age of accountability is 8, I don't know how that will change or if it will. And quite frankly, I don't care. But the reality of it is there is that shift on, hey, I need to be informed about what I'm committing to before I'm right in front of that, whatever that commitment is.
Yeah.
At 8, that there's more of a push to, hey, can we be aware of what we're really getting into here?
And then at 18, it's like, okay, you're going to leave for 2 years and be human trafficked. I human trafficked my son. He went to a foreign country. They took his passport. He wasn't able to leave if he wanted to because he didn't have his passport, right? That's what happens on a Mormon mission.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You are literally human trafficking these 18-year-olds all over the world because they can't come back. They're stuck there.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Unless, of course, there's some, this is my challenge perhaps to that, altogether an interesting argument here, and that is, unless you go, and that's the way at least some high demand religions work in terms of just the way they see law and order, principle and practice, is you'll communicate to that leader, that priesthood leader who has stewardship over you. And they'll determine that based on that conversation, because
But
clearly...
Elder Stum, do you really want to go home and disgrace your family like that? The Lord is counting on you here in Argentina to convert millions of people. You haven't had a single baptism this month, but I know you will next month.
That's the challenge, right? That's the challenge of that generation saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I think there'll be more and more a pushback that way, not because they're stubborn or entitled, though I hear that among older generations as much as it is, I need to be in charge of me. It's back to that idea of institutional authority having a lot of role and a lot of influence pre-internet. And with the dissemination of information and a lot of the challenges, not only to truth claims purported by any religion as something that are real, that have either been thrown out or amended in any faith, Mormonism among others, individuals are saying, no, this is some of what I need. And this is actually what I'm going to do. And they would do well, I think, that I'm not here to counsel worldwide religions, but they would do well to start considering a less literal approach to things, because the greater the retrenchment on some of the literal truth claims, the more problematic it comes as more individuals say, hey, at least for me or for this person or for that person, that maybe wasn't as real as we thought.
Yeah.
And it's something that we believe, but wasn't grounded in reality.
Like a lot of Book of Mormon claims. And we're not going to get into that really, but if you want to, there's a lot of stuff there where they said this is history for years. They've said
true.
this is literal history. But now they're like, well, it's not so much literal history, but they're great stories. There's some cool stories there. Make a great movie. The Mormons couldn't watch it. It'd be rated R.
There would be a lot of bloodshed. Something interesting, a writer that I follow, Jana Reese, wrote a book called The Next Mormons some time ago and was interviewed on KUER, among other places, with Doug Fabrizio in his podcast, Radio West.
I love the calm way they talk on those episodes.
They talk super calm, and I'm not feeling really calm, but I'm having fun. Is this idea that she posed this interesting idea around worldwide religions, but she was specifically kind of highlighting Mormonism in this place. And that was, I wonder if we've been asking, she's speaking of the faith collectively. I think she's a teacher or historian or something within her local congregation. But she said, I wonder if we've been asking the wrong question the whole time. And that's, there was so much focus in the formulation of the faith that there's this, are we the right ones? Are we the true ones? Are we the only right ones? This elitist, exclusive, were it? Or should there, or could there, or need there be going forward more of a focus on this is the good we bring the world, bring it, versus no, we're the right ones.
Exactly.
No, don't be cafeteria. Get in alignment. Stay on the covenant path, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell Mormon leaders what to teach, as much as it is her argument had some salience to me, and that is, can the focus be how do we bring about, or how does that faith tradition bring about more goodness to the world?
Yeah.
then I'm going to be bold for a minute and say arrogance, because
Right.
they're those, the South Park episode all together. There's a couple.
Who is the right ones?
Right
Oh, it was
up
the
there. It's like,
Mormons.
there's such a challenge that on so many levels is sacrilegious to believers. But I think there's some wisdom in it as they're walking through with St. Peter through heaven, and there's the door shut with the window. Who is that? We need to be careful as we go by that mansion in the house of our Father. That's the Mormons. They think they're the only ones here. That globally there is this perception by those, at least outside of the faith, that see some of that, unfortunately, exclusive and elite attitude, and aren't able to see the goodness. I think there's so much goodness among community, among service that you find among Mormons that you don't find other places. A real rally among those things. And it's hard to see that when other individuals are in this place of concern, right, with who's right or what are we doing.
Do you think maybe we look at kids, and when I was growing up, if you questioned authority, you'd get smacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Millennials and Gen Z don't get hit.
That's because they'll sue you.
Well, right, but they question more because they can. If we questioned, it was, but these kids can question, and it's a good thing because that's nature. Can I take the car tonight, Dad? No. Why? We want to know why. We want to know the answers. We want to have someone explain it to us. And I think that that's what we're finding more of these younger kids is they're more bold and enabled to ask those questions. It's a brilliant couple of generations that we have brought up. I don't know that they're entitled. I think that they are enabled to ask those hard questions and to expect answers.
I think they do have that freedom to ask questions. As parents, we get to determine, are we teaching our kids what to, you've heard this before, this isn't me, but or an original idea to me, but are we teaching them what to think or how to think?
Yes, 100%. Nan's got the consternation look. What do you want to say? Step forward, lean into the microphone, please.
I don't know. I think if I had a redo with my kids and I knew what I know now, I think the things that I would teach them would be completely different. I would want them to know who they are all by themselves. I would want them to know all about their own power and their own choice making and how consequences work because of their own choices and what integrity is, and like really drill into them who they are and what their heavenly gifts are and who they could be all by themselves, because they're magic all in themselves. They don't need anything else in addition to what they are. But we need other people. But how much more rich would relationships be if we knew who we were and then we walked into something and it was like, hey, I really like this place. I really like these people. I really like this belief system. And then you add it on top of your own belief system instead of having to have to deconstruct and reconstruct and rip crap apart. It's just so painful.
How about this? How about they baptize you before you die? So instead of
then you're
living a life
clean.
of shame, you just go and live your life, and then before you die, you get baptized, and you're like, ta-da! And you've made it.
I like that idea.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would make a lot more sense. They would have a
Unfolding.
lot of people convert. They wouldn't make as much money, though.
They would be coming in later. I want to put a plug in for a guy named John Ogden, who is a tremendous person I follow John on medium.com. Some of his writings, which are really interesting. He wrote an article called Sad Heaven that I just can't forget, but he created a program called upliftkids.org. I don't have any financial connection to his website. Just want to make that really clear. But I do pay the membership fee for it. I like it that much. And essentially what he's put together, and I didn't think it would come up on the show, but I'm thinking of it per Nan's comment, is he's put together these lessons of sorts for parents with teenager, young adult, less young adult, more teenager, prepubescence, and then like you're younger, younger than 12 to 5. He's put these online lessons together that you could mirror to a smart TV. They have videos. They have all kinds of just goodness in there on mindfulness, on patience.
I love it.
On kindness. But he's pulled from like 15 different faith traditions and said, this is kind of what the Christians are doing over here. The Hindus would say this. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, would be saying this. And it has this information in, and it's beautiful. And some of what he's saying is, hey, can we worry less? I don't know that he said this. This is just a message that I picked up, I think, from the curriculum, which is less about theology or religion, as it's not typically focused on a deity, and more upon principles to help human beings live what he believes a full life. But he's pulled it from all these different faith traditions. And as such, it's been beautiful just to see the content. It's got some annual membership, but he just keeps piling it on, and it's growing.
I love that.
And it's cool. But this kind of this idea of, are we really going to spend a lot of time with those that we love and teach and influence, focusing on who's right and engaging in exclusive kind of language into, as I would as well, as I raised my kids now in your comment, I would have done a little bit differently. Hey, these are the things that are going to help you be a whole human.
Yes.
And seek your creator.
Yes. Yes.
And it's cool. Upliftkids.org, but it's cool. Check it out.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Well, since you're giving plugs, why don't we plug you a little bit? Justin is actually...
That didn't sound right.
It didn't sound right. Now he's 14.
He's gonna,
Come on, man. Oh,
I've got a runny nose,
on.
so I can be plugged in the nostrils.
You're
my
so
allergies.
lucky that Justin's coming to your rescue there. We all know where you're going.
I did take my Allegra. One every morning. And knock the mic over.
That's my wife.
I love it.
Why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners what you specialize in and how you might be able to help them and how they could get a hold of you if they wanted to have a session with you.
Oh, sure. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm practicing in St. George, Utah. I see couples. I see individuals. I have a small handful of teenagers, young adults, lots of individual adults. And I treat mood disorders. That would be depression, anxiety. I have an emphasis on faith crisis, faith expansion, faith transition, all this stuff. And, could point you in a lot of super good directions on that. I don't make any attempt to lead, I call it shelf cracking, but that's just a Justin term, but lead people in or out of a particular faith tradition, as the therapy is really about helping you get in alignment with your own inner knowing and what you find value in, and then me supporting that in whatever ways I can as you sort through your own dissonance and guilt and shame and fear and navigate your family relationships. That's where all the family therapy training comes in. I deal with trauma as well. I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting. I do EMDR remotely, which is really cool. You can do that now online, and it's fantastic through some super cool technology platforms that I utilize. And treat marriages, mixed faith marriages. I've spent a lot of time in, and that can just be such a hard place for people too. If we have someone who says, no, I really want to do the Mormon path, and has a spouse that says, I don't think I want to do this, and I'm going to move the goalposts. Mormon leaders are moving the yard lines on the field, and I don't like that. And so I'm going to move my goalpost. And then we have a husband or wife in the stands that's saying, this isn't what I bargained for. And so that the mixed faith dynamic, that's where the marriage and family therapy training comes in, can just shred people, because the felt feelings, at least those that I've witnessed in the believer, those that staying, almost feels like infidelity.
Oh,
and to the parishioner who's exiting, it can feel like my spouse is having an affair with the church and choosing them over me. So that's a whole dynamic in that too.
That.
So mood disorders, trauma, couples, individuals, and faith expansion.
And even though you practice in St. George, do you do remote sessions for all of those
some remote
things?
coaching. Yeah.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we will put a link to Justin's calendar in the show notes. Please, if you need someone to talk to, he's a great guy, and I know he'd be able to help anyone out there.
Oh, 100%. He's been instrumental in my healing, so I've seen him lots.
Thanks, Nan. You're kind. And thanks for those kind words. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. You're a great guy.
Thank you.
He's not an asshole like me. Why are you looking at me like that?
Only sometimes. And when the jackassery does come out, it's usually off the mic. So.
Yeah, he's not telling any of the stories that we thought he'd tell.
Right.
I know, right?
I've tamed it.
Do you have anything else on there?
I don't think there's anything else other than, at least for your listeners, I think reviewing James Fowler's Stages of Faith, explained in plain language. You can Google that. Might be really helpful to kind of look at where you're at in your own faith development. If you're Mormon and want a super interesting read that was out of print and came back in, Thomas Worth and McConkie, who runs the Lower Lights Society and Community up in Salt Lake, did publish Navigating a Mormon Faith Crisis, which is a super interesting read. He left Mormonism and became a Buddhist for 17 years and then came back. And although I don't know that he's a literal believer, has some interesting ideas around that fit with Eric Erickson's work around identity development, but more importantly, around Fowler's faith stages. And in his Navigating a Mormon Faith Crisis, he talks specifically about these 4 or 5 different kinds of Mormons: the diplomat, the expert, the individualist, the achiever. And he's broken it down so you can kind of size up for those in the Mormon faith where they sit, where their family members sit, based on this developmental model that's similar to Fowler's faith stages. If you want something that's really expansive around knowledge, belief, and faith, you've got your Brian McLaren, Faith After Doubt, which is a really good read. I believe he's Catholic. Fowler is a Methodist man, but really good information around expansion. If you're in a really high demand faith community, Stephen Hassan's work about cult-based mind control is super interesting. And it's just some of these dynamics that your really extreme high demand religions, how they exact perfect obedience and some of these things out of people. He's got some interesting research on. It's called the BITE model.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, super interesting work that is coming out by him. So there's a lot of, I think, different kinds of information. I think what I would add to conclude is really, it is about expanding, and it is about actually one of the read is Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity. My top 5, at least at this moment, that could change, best books.
Wow.
She uses Dante.
That's a big endorsement.
It's a pretty big one, and I do get a commission from her. Just kidding. No, Martha Beck doesn't know who this small man in St. George is, but she uses Dante's Inferno as kind of a backdrop and walks you through, which should super support the work Nan does here and in her coaching and work. How do I get my integrity and my value system in alignment with what I'm doing with my life? Mm-hmm. And she uses Dante's Inferno to do that. And so those are some reads that I think could support your listeners that don't lead people in or out of a faith. Obviously, the Thomas Worth and McConkie book, You Can't Get Away from Mormonism with that name.
Yeah, I was going to say, those are 2 really big
those are pretty
names.
Mormon. He's Mormon. I mean, he is. But to that end, I think
that's like if you were named Nephi. Right. People know.
Right. They're going to know. So those are just some resources as people attempt to expand that initial question that came, how do we help individuals in this place? It's really just allowing them to remember, hey, I get to believe whatever I want, and what I believe today, I don't have to believe tomorrow or in 6 months that I'm an evolving being, and that's okay. Versus, no, I've changed and now I'm broken or shameful, and we're not. We're all. Ezekiel Sanchez was the guy that created some wilderness therapy stuff, programming back in the 70s, and he said something interesting. He said, within every child is a seed of divinity, which is super interesting.
I love it.
Yeah,
it's
like
true.
That. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
you were generous to invite me, and I'm glad to come.
Thank you.
We were just thrilled to have you. Thank you for adding some credibility to the Mormon Medium podcast. We really appreciate that.
Well, and also offering some hope and some light in some dark places, because I've seen personally with my clients how dark things can get and how lost they can feel. So these are some great resources and some great insights. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In the day.